Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of August 5th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, and this podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. The feature spotlight for this episode is CX, Customer Experience. We kick it off with an exclusive interview with Rick Parrish, Vice President and Principal Analyst from Forrester, who joins me to discuss the latest Canadian CX report. This report covering 161 brands across 14 industries, including retail, with Forrester talking to over 62,000 Canadian consumers. Next, I'm joined by customer experience guru Tara Doherty, who takes us along for an insider's view of CX as she talks about her experiences working in Canada and around the world with companies as they try to master the Zen of CX with a few wins, ties, and fails along the way. Lastly, I'll take a look at the retail news of the week, but first, let's listen to my interview with Rick from Forrester.
Rick, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
Very good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Listen, thanks for joining me. I'm a big fan of the work that Forrester does, and I'm a big fan of customer experience, and these two things have come together in your new report. I want to talk all about it, how you approach understanding customer experience, its connection into loyalty, and all kinds of different sectors. But why don't we start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, your area of focus, how you came to your particular expertise. And you probably should, most of my retailers is I think Forrester needs no introduction, but we probably should introduce Forrester a little bit just in case some folks might not know about Forrester. But let's start with you. Tell us about yourself, your journey, and what you do at Forrester.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, I'm one of the principal analysts on the customer experience research team. I and my 20 or so colleagues, we do original primary research into the state of CX, best practices for improving CX, pitfalls, technology, people, process, and everything. I personally, I focus on writing our benchmark reports that measure CX quality globally. I also focus on what we call customer experience management, the key activities that companies have to perform to get better at CX. And I also have a new line of research on what we're calling values-based customer experience. More and more consumers want to do business with companies that reflect their values. And so helping companies figure that out. And I also focus on government customer experience. Customer experience important in the government space, too. And so there's a lot of work to be done there.
Geez, I almost want to ask you what to do with your spare time with a scope that big.
I don't remember spare time.
No doubt. So that's excellent. So you really have a global sense. And of course, Forrester, tell us a little bit more about Forrester and the kind of scope and scale of the team there as well.
Sure. In a nutshell, Forrester generally is a global research and advisory company, and we help companies succeed through customer-centric transformations. Our research shows that being laser-focused on the customer, sometimes what we call customer obsession, everything focused around the customer is the best way to achieve business success, no matter what your competitors are doing, no matter what the economy is doing.
Right.
And so my more than 100 and such colleagues do research across different aspects of that. Of course, I'm on the CX team. There's folks who work with CIOs and marketing, app dev, et cetera, across both sort of business technology and the marketing and strategy environment.
And your CX expertise, it's so to speak industry agnostic, because this is the Voice of Retail. Obviously, my audience is primarily retailers, and I should tell everyone that after we do this kind of a part one where we get to talk to the subject matter expert about CX, but in the fall I'm going to have Sucharita Mulapuru on, a great friend of mine and Retail Council of Canada, to really go deep into the retail sector. But in this conversation, we'll talk about CX at a high level. So let's just jump right in. The Canadian Customer Experience Index 2019. Tell us about the report. What is it? What sectors do you measure? And how big is its scope? It's a pretty impressive document. Take us through just the scope and scale and what it is.
Sure. So it's our annual benchmark report on the state of CX quality in Canada based on our Customer Experience Index data set. We do annual reports, annual benchmark reports based on the CX Index in several countries around the world, one of which is Canada. And the cool thing about the CX Index is that we're measuring, and this is really important for folks to remember when they when they're hearing about the CX Index and for the rest of our conversation is that the CX Index measures how well the quality of the customer experience drives customer loyalty. Right? So we're not just measuring, say, customer satisfaction, how much people like you, because after all, it doesn't really matter if people just like you. What matters is how much the experience drives loyalty. That's why we're doing this, right? To drive customer loyalty. And so what we're looking at in this report is how well the customer experience drives loyalty. And the top line scores that we provide in the CX Index on a scale of 0 to 100. And so the better the quality of your experience drives loyalty, the higher your score. If people love you, but not in a way that drives loyalty, you're going to score low. Right?
And what would be an instance where you love you love a business, whatever it is, you really, you would find it, I guess, a mystifying. Listen, your customers like you, but they're not really loyal, or they don't shop or purchase.
Sure. Yeah, we've referred to this sometimes as the Borders Books problem. Borders Books used to be a pretty strong retail brand.
Sure. And
they were scoring high on customer satisfaction measures at the very same time as their customers were saying, oh, we love Borders. Borders is awesome. I'm going to go buy some books on Amazon.
I don't shop there. I love them, but I don't shop there. Interesting.
Exactly, right? And we definitely want to avoid that problem. And so, what we're looking at is how well the customer experience drives three kinds of customer loyalty, really: retention, enrichment, and advocacy. And we're looking at it across 14 channels, and we're examining several dozen different drivers of the quality of the experience. But the sort of key number here is that top line score that it all rolls up into 0 to 100. In Canada, we look at 161 brands across 14 industries.
Wow!
Right? And so I won't name all the industries, but it's things like hotels, retail, of course, banks, investment firms, auto manufacturers, airlines, right? All the the companies that people interact with every day.
And when you say advocacy, just so I want to unpack that one a little bit. Is that like a willingness to recommend score? I mean, the willingness to recommend score, you've got its advocates and folks who are not so much in love with it, because one of its criticisms is while it kind of measures one element, it doesn't necessarily measure intent. But that's right. Kind of what you're getting at with advocacy and this fuller measure of CX. Is that the point?
Absolutely. Two thoughts occur to me here. One is that sometimes people think that advocacy is really the only type of loyalty that matters, and that you can take advocacy as a proxy for all three kinds of loyalty, which is simply not true, and our data shows it's not true. Retention, the willingness to continue doing business with a brand; enrichment, the willingness to do more business with the brand. And the way we approach advocacy, we approach advocacy in terms of willingness to recommend to someone who is in the market for those goods or services. Because you could tell the world that you love Acme rockets, but if nobody else is in the market for an Acme rocket or a rocket of any sort, this just doesn't matter.
Right.
So we're looking at advocacy in we think a more powerful way than just willingness to say good things. It's willingness to say good things specifically to people who are looking for what that company provides.
And let's talk about the process a bit, because I want to be crystal clear, because sometimes we look at research that's global focused but isn't really Canadian. This is research done on brands in Canada. Would you say 161 brands?
161 brands.
161 brands. And I'm just looking at some of the numbers in the report. You talked to over 60,000 Canadian individuals. Do I have that number right?
That's right. It's over 62,000 people, customers in Canada, who had interactions with at least one of these brands over a certain period of time. There's a certain period of time in the past, right? So this is not a general kind of public perception survey, like a brand perception survey,
right?
Nor is it a survey of what folks in other countries may have heard about brands in Canada. This is a survey of the people who are actually customers of these brands in Canada.
And that's so it's an online survey. You fielded it this year, so it's a 2019 pretty fresh data, would you say?
That's right. Yes. Yep. It's fresh data. We fielded it in late Q1 if I recall correctly. And then the data comes back, and we've got a whole floor of data scientists who dig in on it, and then we all work together to figure out what it means. And
so the other thing that it's interesting. So when I look at these 116 rankings, you're a tough score, by the way. I don't see anything. I don't think I see it. When I look at your scale, I see that 80 plus is excellent. I'm not sure paging through here I see anyone in the excellent. We'll get back to that.
That's right.
So you guys are either tough markers or there's room for improvement. I guess it's one of those glass half full things. But when I look at this, so should I understand that are these brands in any category, retail or whatever, are they being marked against each other, or is it an absolute measurement per brand? So is the number one highest score? Does that represent them compared to all the other brands in the same category, or is it just kind of an absolute measure of, on all the things we measure against, here's how that individual brand scored? How do I interpret that?
That's right, the latter. There's no curve, there's no comparison. It's not like my college physics teacher who said only 3 people in this class will get A's and everyone else will get C's and D's. Right. It is. I'm not still bitter about that, by the way. It is possible, hypothetically, for all 161 brands to score 100. Okay.
So you don't ask in the survey, I'm looking at airlines, you don't say compare Porter to WestJet. Nope. That's not how it's done. It's an absolute measurement. That's really good. So
that's right. We're asking someone, of these brands, which ones did you interact with? Yeah. And then we, at random sort of choose which one to ask you, about. So yeah, we're not comparing.
Okay. So now I got a good handle on how you do this. Walk us through some of the overall key takeaways at a high level from Canada. What did you learn?
Sure. So I think the biggest takeaway here is that, 2019 is Canada's best year ever for CX. Now, it's still not great, but it's the best year ever, and I want to give Canada credit for that.
Yeah, I don't see the numbers don't knock me over. I mean, I read the first line, it's a great year, but then I looked at some of the numbers, I'm like, meh.
That's right. Yeah. So well, let me talk you through some of the kind of high level findings here, and let's see why I'm saying it's the best year ever. So the average score across all 161 brands, 0 to 100, is 67.2. Now that's a 1.2 point improvement from 2018.
And that in yours looks like it falls in the okay classification.
It does. That's right. So the average experience is just okay. But let me dig a little bit deeper here. When we look at the brand level, 23% of brand scores rose. So nearly 1 in 4 brand scores rose. Where on the other hand, just 1% of brand scores declined. Okay. Right. So 23% went up, only 1 went down. That is by far Canada's best performance ever. Now, sure, that still leaves 76% of brands flat.
Right.
But 23% up, that's good news. Now, the average point gain was 3 points out of 100, which is slightly larger than the average point loss, which was 2.5 points. And that's significant. That's statistically significant. Those are statistically significant numbers.
And when you say ever, I'm not sure I asked you this, how many years have you been fielding this in the Canadian market?
Since 2015.
There? Okay, so that's a good 4 or 5 years, right? Okay.
That's right. It's a good 4 or 5 years, and especially since, of course, the customer experience field is about 20 years old. But it's only the last, several years, only the last, 4 or 5 years in which mainstream companies started getting serious about it.
Right. And so those are some percentage things. What else did you learn?
Well, so good news there. We also saw that you already referred to the scale where we have those 5 performance categories from excellent, to good, to okay, to poor, to very poor. And Right, and as of right now, we saw a big bump in that good category. Right, so 27% of brands now provide good customer experience. That still leaves 65% in the okay category. Right? But we now have relatively few brands in that poor and very poor category. Those categories are shrinking. We see some movement upward. Now, as you did mention a minute ago, we still see no brands in that excellent category, that 80 to 100 category. There's no reason why a brand can't be there. I mean, there's nothing about the study that precludes that.
Right.
It's just that no brand is yet that good at driving loyalty through the customer experience.
And certainly it's robust. I mean, it's 116 brands. If we step outside of the Canadian context, are other, I guess it's not fair to compare country to country, but are other, do you see those kind of scores? Does anybody get excellent plus around the world, like in any category? Any lessons that we can, inspiration,
yeah.
I guess, right?
So in the U.S., a few years ago, we had one brand out of about 300 that had just made it into the excellent category. That brand has since declined. Back into the good category. Elsewhere around the world, especially in the developing markets, previously we'd seen big movements upward, and we were watching. We're saying, "Oh, we're going to get some excellence." No. What happened was, improvement tapered off. Right. So there are around the world, there are a few brands that could be on the cusp. They could get there. But this actually is a good segue into one of the other big findings that we've had, which is that still, despite Canada's relatively strong performance this year, no real CX leaders have emerged. And when I say a CX leader, what I mean is a brand that's risen to the top of the rankings and then continued to improve. Right? We have a list of 161 brands. Clearly, some brands are at the top and some are at the bottom.
Sure.
However, if you're just at the top and you're just sitting there, I don't think of that as real leadership. You're not leading people anywhere. You're not going anywhere. Right? And so we still haven't seen any real leaders emerge. The top 5% of brands in the CX index across industries, we call these the elites. And the elites are, again, mostly stagnant, which we've seen year over year over year. Also at the industry level, the top scoring brand in each industry, they're also flat again, right? Which we see year over year over year. So those top ranked brands, whether the elites across all industries or just at the individual industry level, they're flat. They're flat year over year. And when we do see changes in the top scoring brands, it's usually due to just teeny tiny fluctuations. Many of which might not even be statistically significant. So which says, in effect, it's stagnant.
So it's ridiculously hard to get into the excellent category. It's even harder to stay for those who are there. And just because you're at the top of the pile in your category doesn't mean you've made it. What is going on? So as you said, CX has an understanding that it is connected in meaningful ways to all the measures you talk about, loyalty, business improvement. So that's been around 20 years. I think there's an appreciation at the boardroom level. If I asked walked into a boardroom and asked people if they thought customer experience was important, it's hard to say someone would say no. So what's holding, as you scan this massive amount of data around the world, what is it that's holding businesses back? Are expectations from customers unrealistic, or is it, what is it? What's holding it back?
Sure, there are a few things. And expectations are one of them. Now, customer expectations are not skyrocketing, right? Sometimes you hear people say that. Customer expectations are skyrocketing. They're not. They are creeping upward, though. We see that virtually everywhere. There is actually one place we see customer expectations flat, and that happens to be in their interactions with government. So So people don't expect any better from government. But everywhere else, expectations are creeping upward. Now, we also know that most companies are doing their best to improve the quality of the experience. The problem is it's a race between two turtles, right? There's the expectations turtle and there's the improvement turtle. And if the improvement turtle has to go faster than the expectations turtle for the quality of the experience to improve and drive loyalty to a greater degree. Right now, the turtles are going about equally fast, which means companies may be working, but expectations are rising. And so the quality of the experience for most companies, 76% in Canada, is flat. So expectations are one thing. There are a couple other things, too. We find that a lot of companies,
I couldn't believe it. And these are
they do a lot of CX
these are like
stuff,
$200,000 maps,
but they're not focused on the things that matter. They're not focused on the drivers that matter. For instance, we see this all the time. Companies make a lot of assumptions about what they need to be working on to improve the quality of the experience, and we see companies go wrong with that all the time. So they're working hard, they're doing things, and they can show, look, we're doing all this stuff. It's not the right stuff.
So lots of tactics, but tactically they're busy, but
that's right.
Missing the key drivers. Is that what basically what you're saying?
That's right. And we are also seeing some growing institutional drag because in most cases, customer experience professionals haven't been able to really access those strategic resources in companies. As you say, you'd be hard pressed to find someone in the C-suite who would disagree with the statement CX is important. However, it rarely goes beyond mere agreement. Right? Most customer experience programs are funded on a project by project basis. Right? There's any number of things, and one of the reasons why we see kind of institutional drag increasing is because we're starting to see employees get a little nervous about their position. We see, of course, across industries this idea that rising automation is going to put employees at risk, right? Employees' jobs at risk, right? People are worried about change. People are getting lots of technologies thrown at them at work, right? And so employees in one case they're climbing up a bit, right? And they're becoming a little bit less and less willing to kind of go out on a limb, try new things, experiment with new things, go in different directions. And so we're starting to see that increased drag on CX programs as well. So that's another thing that's going on. I could go on and on, but these are a few sort of a big picture things that are impacting this.
Interesting. Well, in one way, I'm encouraged by the survey's results that things are better than ever, and in another way, I guess I'm also encouraged that there's lots of opportunity for improvement because businesses, retailers, I'm sure look and say, how on earth can I improve my EBITDA, my loyalty, and looking at your study, it looks like it's definitely possible, but it's going to take some more focus. So, the last couple of minutes we have left, I guess I'd ask you two last questions. One is, if you had such a group, you're at a boardroom table and you said, listen, there's one or two things you just need to do to improve your CX scores to get into the 80 plus. What would your advice be? What's the number one or number two thing that companies should do to move themselves into that and stay into that category?
Right. Here are two things. One is you need a formal prioritization framework to approve and reject CX improvement ideas. Very few companies have a formal framework with written things and a formal evaluative structure because it's really hard to say no to really cool ideas. And so most companies get caught up in a lot of shiny objects. And not all shiny objects are tech objects. Sometimes there are other sort of objects. And so having a formal prioritization framework based on real data, based on real understanding of what's going to improve the quality of the experience in a way that drives loyalty and what's not. Have that framework. Have some gatekeepers, CX council, something like that, who are, who hold on to that, and that will give your company a formal way to say yes and no to different projects. It's a way to work smarter, not harder.
Okay,
that's one thing. Another thing I would say is there are many pitfalls. Okay? And I could answer this question for hours, and sometimes I do. But I'll just limit myself to one other thing. One thing to avoid. So sort of one thing to do, one thing to avoid.
Oh, great. That's good. Perfect.
So the one of the most widespread and damaging mistakes we see is companies paying their employees, incentivizing their employees based on CX quality outcomes. Right? This is your bonus, depends on the CSAT survey or whatever.
Yeah.
At any level.
And it's interesting you say that, because I've had many frontline, let's call them frontline experiences at banks, retailers, where they say, listen, I get paid based on the customer satisfaction. Could you fill this out for me? And you're like,
yep.
Right. That's
exactly.
kind of what you're talking about, right? Yeah.
That's right. That is, and I raise that one because that is a huge torpedo in the side of your CX improvement program, and we see it so often. There are other pitfalls, but this is the biggest and most widespread. When you incentivize employees based on those outcomes, usually on the survey response, you don't get better CX. In fact, you get worse CX because you get that sort of, you get the internet installer standing in your living room begging you for a 10, or he's going to lose his job, his kids are going to go hungry. You get which is a worse experience than you would have otherwise.
You have these distortions. I in my past, I was working with a retailer, and I was looking at one particular store's scores for customer satisfaction, and they were off the charts good. And I'm like, let's go watch and see what they're doing right. And what they were doing right is they were only handing the survey to people who were smiling.
There you go.
They checked out. And so anybody who looked like they were either neutral or maybe weren't so happy, they didn't get a survey. And we're like, okay. So they're kind of gaming the
behavior.
Right.
Yep.
So interesting.
So that's, and we see so many companies think that that this is a great idea, but it's actually a terrible one.
Well, it's such great insight. And as you say, we could probably talk for a couple hours. So I think I'll look forward to talking to your colleague to do a deep dive, Sucharita, to do a deep dive into retail. I'd love to have you back on the podcast as this conversation evolves, because I think you've raised so many great issues. It's such a great report. How do my listeners get a hold of you and learn a bit more? How do we learn more about yourself and Forrester? How do they get a hold of you, Rick?
Sure. Well, Forrester.com is always a good place to start. We do a lot of blogging on there, which is sort of light versions of our published syndicated reports. Yeah. Also, of course, you can always email me, rparrish, RPARRISH @Forrester.com. And that's the best way to get in touch with me. Happy to chat with anybody.
Well, fantastic. Listen, thanks so much for being on the Voice of Retail. It's a great conversation, and I wish us all well in getting past that 80 mark, and maybe having more and more of the businesses that we deal with achieve that the Zen of CX. So once again, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, great talking to you.
Tara, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Mike.
You and I have known each other for many, many years, going back, I think, to marketing magazines, early 2000s. But for the listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal journey, and what you do today.
It's an exciting journey. I am doing the same thing I did 17 years ago, and that's user experience and customer experience. So when I graduated from Waterloo, I started right away in an agency called FCB, Foot Cone and Building. And I was building websites for Levi's and Mead Johnson. And as that grew with my career, so did digital. And then I moved on to cars and different brands. So I had the luxury of spending quite a bit of time over at Cassette Communications. Went off and on my own gig for a bit, back to Cassette, did some work overseas. And here I am again with Akendi, as well as two other companies that I co-founded.
And tell us a little bit about Akendi and your role there, just to bring us up to current state of affairs, so to speak.
Oh, perfect. So Akendi is a a research, UX, and design firm. So they really specialize in intentional experiences. So online or offline. So it could be wayfinding, it could be a website, it could be an app, it could be a physical piece of hardware for, let's say, hand rehab or stroke patients. So anything that has a human interaction to it, that has a performance-based KPI to it and an overall experience is something we'll get involved with to create from scratch or optimize.
So well beyond digital and into overall, how things and interfaces fit with people.
Yeah, I think the world is evolving to experiences, and what we're seeing now is the isolation of just one-offs don't exist anymore. That one pillar of my experience with the Bay is that one checkout. Far from it. So we are now getting involved in not only the full funnel of experiences from awareness right through to advocacy, but we're actually creating the products, which is the amazing part. Working with clients to create the product and then bring it right through to market and evolve it for them and optimize it.
So, almost or 20 years in CX. So I thought, what a perfect person to talk to about this report that Rick Parrish just put out from Forrester. I just interviewed him on the podcast. So I wanted to, I talked to Rick and he's done the survey. We talked about the methodology and some of his findings. It's great research because it's Canadian, it's cross industry. So it's everything that you've been focused on in many industries. So, some good news, from their perspective, things have gotten better. But, I had some interesting observations from it that, you still haven't got perfection when it comes to CX. I mean, it's been a long time that it's been working at. Some good news. From your perspective, what gets in the way of progress? And, my observation in the study was on their scale, 80 to 100 is excellent. And out of, I think it was like 116 companies, nobody scored excellent. This far down the line, what gets in the way of that from companies' perspective, from your experience?
Humanity. We're human, right? We want to strive to be perfect, but let's realize we're never going to be perfect. You cannot please everybody all the time. So that's the first thing. But I think we're all trying to strive to be and produce exceptional experiences, right? Not perfect, but exceptional. And I think the report really gets to that. The report is about, does the good and great outweigh that one bad time? Because bad stuff's going to happen. If you work in digital, the site might be down. Like, there's going to be something that does not work perfect. People have sick days in retail. Like, things don't always, you open late. Things happen. Certainly, I know when I was quite excited when I read this report because I'm like, ooh, of course I looked up a lot of clients I work with. It was like Christmas. I'm like, what's the ranking? And I'm like, ooh, burn. Some surprises in here and some not so surprising. The stagnation of the overall scores and not rising to the top. Certainly, first of all, we're always going to strive to be the best. I don't know if we'll always get up there and certainly be able to keep that score over 80, right?
I mean that last point's so relevant because Rick touched on that a couple of times. We talked about it. Is one thing to get 80 plus, and he said, listen, it's not just Canada, by the way. I've seen this across North America, but staying there is really hard, right? It's hard not to backslide in this survey.
Yeah, and I mean, one example I'm really close to that's not in here, but is the Sick Kids versus campaign that we did, right? It brought in, $700+ million in a short period of time through the website, through donations, through that whole e-com flow.
Right. And that's that Sick Kids Foundation versus award-winning fantastic campaign.
Right. So why can't we keep replicating that, right? Because it was so good.
Wash, rinse, repeat. Why just get
it doesn't...
Is it lightning? Is it just happens? It's like have you ever been asked to create a viral video? It's like...
Yeah, I know. It doesn't really exist.
Right.
I think we're always striving... we're creating experience. First, you have to nail those basics, right? Before you put on the bells, the whistles. Digital transformation is slowing us down a little bit. A lot of people are on legacy systems, frankly.
Explain that a bit. So when you say digital transformation is slowing us down, is that because people want to move into digital but are held back somehow?
We all want to move. The best way to think about it is consumers, I want you to know me, right? I don't want you to always predict the scarf I want or the pair of jeans I want at the Gap. But I want you to know my likes and dislikes if I interact with you. I want you to know what I purchased before. I don't want you to recommend something to me like Amazon that's not applicable, that was a one-off purchase. So that essence of know your customer, that unified customer, that data point, that everything, no matter whether you call me, you come into the store, I know you, Tara O'Doherty, one data point.
It's certainly on the
there.
mind. It's certainly front of mind of retailers who think about and are told, and we both would extol. Personalization is one path forward, right? 100%. To be able to compete is make relevant offers, say relevant things, make it. But it seems harder than that,
you have to have systems that talk to each other. So if you have different databases, so if you have your digital marketing committee or team, and you have a separate CRM team, and you have a separate frontline team, and you have a call center, and all of those datas don't, kind of pool up to one giant database, then 5 or 6 different Taras, and you're going to treat them differently.
My guest last week, Manolo from Q Division, called them data lakes. And then he goes in organizations, and there's all these lakes of data. Exactly what you said, right? Here's what they did online. Here's what they did in store. Here's what they did, and the merging or intersection of those lakes is tough.
What you're going to see is the newcomers that coming out, like the startups that don't have legacy systems, so they don't have these old systems. And when I say legacy system, I think a lot of Rogers, where you'll call and you're like, hey, I want to talk to someone about this. Can I have your number? And your name, identity verification. Please hold, transfer. Hi again. Can I have your number, your name? Please hold. So having that sort of disjointed, very frustrating customer journey experience hurts the bottom line, hurts the customer. But it's a technology issue. And they were talking about that at Bell when I worked on Bell 16 years ago, and they're still talking about it today. So they're all trying to get there. So you have these young companies, right? You'll see them in the report, like these young financial companies going pure digital straight out of the gate. Very simple, one system. E-commerce companies that are going pure digital first, but then opening these pop-up stores because it's easy, it's clean, we know you, the one customer. That's where we are today. And you see that in the report when you're looking at these. You see how people treat people in a human way, right? WestJet, that human emotional touch. And they talked a little bit about it in the report, about that emotional aspect. Dealing with people with kindness, dealing to the environment with kindness, dealing to the world with kindness. People want to know brands, right? Like, people love Nike because of some of the rebellious nature of it and are willing to excuse some other behaviors because of that. But when you take old school companies who are working really hard, a lot of the telecoms working hard, they sure are, but they're going to stagnate because they have so much to overcome.
It's interesting. I'm reflecting on what you're saying about this broad breadth of what you put into this basket of CX, a customer usability. It's brand. It's tied up into everything that happens, right?
Yeah, like people would be surprised to know that I've worked on things where I design a signature scent for a box for e-com. So when you open it, not only do you see this beautiful bright color inside, you see instructions on how to reuse the box to make games for kids.
These moments of truth that brands
surprise
seek,
and delight, I like to say, where you're like, oh, that's so smart. 2, it's good for the environment. 3, oh, the smell, it rushes to my head. It gives me a feeling. It was late. The parcel was late. And let's hope it was the right package, in essence, what you ordered. But it creates those great moments. And it's the moments we're creating. These experiences will resonate in your mind. And it's kind of like almost like a human thing. You go to the cottage, it's that morning smell of calm on the lake.
It evokes an emotion, an emotional response and memory, right?
And it's rare, like, if someone talks about telecom like that. It's right. Like, I know when I get my bill, I just feel like it's not necessarily true. But I can tell you, like, I started using one of the apps for, Mogo. No, not Mogo. I have to look on my phone. Coho. I only ordered it because the little cards were pink. And I thought, that's so smart. And it arrived in this beautiful, and it was like a Jay Cheney, ex-Cassette. I think he was the chief strategy officer there for a while and did some great work. Like the experience of the packaging of this card, a total app experience that gave you cash back, rewards, the copy, the notifications, everything was thoughtfully designed. It was purposeful. It was intentful. It made my life super easy. So it's beyond ease of use. It's functionality meets the wow. And there are very few players that do that. So you'll see that reflected. So you may knock it out of the park for your Christmas campaign, but that's not what we're saying. To get to the top echelon, you got to knock it out of the park all the time. It's just, and keep looking forward, not back. So don't just do a 2-day customer journey. Do a 2B state customer journey, and you got to be working hard to push your entire team to go to that direction.
Well, you mentioned Christmas. It's a great segue to, I guess, the last set of questions I'd have for you, which is around it's midsummer when you and I are sitting down chatting about this here at the Spoke Club in Toronto. Holidays coming up faster than retailers in some ways are looking forward to. In other ways, they're
better be ready by October.
So you still have a time to maybe make some tweaks, maybe to think about customer experience. Maybe you're planning your budgets for 2020. So, from an experienced practitioner's perspective, what should retailers be thinking about from a CX perspective? You mentioned customer journeys. Right.
So first of all, I'm going to lay, the groundwork down. I don't think I have to keep bugging people about thinking mobile first. That should be a given. So I'm not going to get into the details and harp on, the fact that everyone has, a handset in their hand. Right. But I'm going to split into two things that I think both can be quite quick wins, but also long-term strategies. Now, we'll start with the data on the back end. So I would always say when I work with clients, when they come in, I'd be like, how well is your onboarding and your registration flow? It's not that sexy when you talk about it, but how well is it performing? Have you optimized it? So where are your drop-offs? Why are your drop-offs happening? Is it form field? Is it mobile optimization? Is it language? What's going on there? Is it too cumbersome? So looking at the pain points through the onboarding flow of whether it's email registration, right through to checkout, and being able to do that. And people sort of self-serving. So that whole self-service has to be tight. So I would say that's not that exciting. But it's cost of entry, and if it's not good, people are not coming back, and they're going to bail. So I'd love to see people investing in that as an ongoing forever strategy, like a diet. It's not just one apple, it's forever. So once you nail that part, then I would love to see more of, and there's a couple of people doing it good. Unfortunately, not that many people are playing there yet. MasterCard's starting to tinkle into it. Experiences, curated, bundled experiences. So let me break that down. You're like, well, I only sell products. How does that relate to me? Well, it really is about the paradox of choice. Christmas is coming. Everyone loves a good story, loves a good package. We want to be thoughtful in our purchases. We just don't want to go in and buy something quick. You want that inspiration. So we all don't have big databases that are running AIs. We're not Amazon in the back to be able to create things. You can manually create these things. So think of your top personas or your top target audiences and create, whether it be bundles, here's a great bundle for your boyfriend. Here's a great bundle for your mom. But put a story around it for the person who wants to learn a new skill, for the person who cares about the environment, for the things that motivate people in a useful, thoughtful way. Bundle them up, add a little story to it. Click one to buy, click to buy all three. And
unpacking the tyranny of choice, it's really about customers can be overwhelmed with too much choice. So it's a curation, and it's a curation exercise, right?
Absolutely. That the curated aspect becomes not only interesting from a storytelling point of view, but from a time-saving point of view, and also because it connects with you on an emotional level. So I'm not talking about long stories or videos, but, I like to see it's why the influencers rose. So I can see you, with your new computer or this great new setup, and I'm like, wow, I love the audio here. Tell me about this, right? So you're indirectly selling me on your setup, but, maybe Mike should start an Amazon page. There you go, right? But it's the story around it, the use. And so having more of that bundling themes, MasterCard's going into unforgettable experiences. I think it's MasterCard. They're doing these dining experiences. So it's the same
Visa
thing.
as well.
I think
Visa does the infinite dining experiences,
right.
if that's what you're thinking.
And then
yeah.
Starwood, too, right, is doing those. So people want things that they can remember.
It's tied to business strategy. They want you to use the Visa card or credit card or MasterCard together.
Of course, and have those great experiences. So even if you're a service, you can still pull something together that is intentful and thoughtful, that makes people's lives easier, but has a bit of a story to it, and bundle and bring it up front, right? Don't make me look for it. Just have a little area, perhaps your homepage or when you're in store. I'd love to see more of that. We're just getting into the experience economy, and people really want to feel good about the brands they're with, and they want to introduce them into their lives, that humanity aspect again.
One of the things you and I were speaking just before, just offline up on the patio, and we were talking about how a lot of I don't know, but a lot of companies go in and they'll create sophisticated customer journey maps and then pretty much put them in a drawer. And maybe some advice is to pull them out of the drawer before the holidays. Is that back to the report around what holds, or back to the topic, what holds companies back? Is that one of the things that holds them back, and is now the time to unleash all that great work?
It is, and I was quite surprised. I was in a client meeting today with another bank, and that came up about, we spent all this money on a customer journey map with another company, and we don't know what to do with it. And I thought, isn't that so interesting? Because that's the third time I've heard it from and these are not little maps. These took, they're all validated by research, they're evidence-based, all of that. So, yeah, it is time to get those up on the wall.
Get those sophisticated tools out of the drawer.
And basically break them down. Each of them usually has a flow to it through the funnel, the stages of a purchase or experience, returning a car, whatever it is. Look for those pain points and tackle 1, 2, or 3 of them. Come up with an idea, a design thinking way of saying, how could we, not like straight idea, how could we make returns easier, right? And let's explore it. We know returns are a pain in the butt during Christmas. How can we make that easier? And explore a way and test it and try it. Those maps should be literally like a checklist that you keep going back until you nail that pain point and then move on. It's a shame that people really don't fully see the value, because if I had my way, this room would be wrapped in them, right? It's a constant reminder. It's a great way to teach empathy, to really get into the shoes of your customer, because
it's hard, which is hard to do at a mass level, right? Like it's hard enough as a single founder or entrepreneur, but when you're talking about scale, executives are kind of trying to get themselves in their shoes. They can do store visits and often do, but I think what I'm hearing is it can make a great tool for understanding your customer at a deeper, more sophisticated
Frontline is my point. Like, this is not just a C-level tool. This is not just for directors. Those directors, everyone should be bringing it right down to frontline, because some of the best ideas come from the call center or from the front line. We're like, absolutely. And the acknowledgement that, yes, people see the challenges we're having. The company knows, and we're all working towards moving everything forward. What a great thing for people to bond over. So get those maps out. And if you don't have one, start mapping. It's not just a visualization of cartoons. It is a competitive tool that can be mapped right back to KPIs and data, and you can really move that needle on some of your revenue. Like, it's amazing.
Well, you've been living at the tip of the spear, so to speak, of customer usability for a long time. How do people get a hold of you if they want to reach out and learn more? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is great, and I guess you'll put up
I'll put up your LinkedIn link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
That's the best way to get a hold of you?
For sure.
Well, listen, you're incredibly busy, incredibly talented. Thank you so much for spending time with the Voice of Retail today, and look forward to catching up a little later in the year, and let's see how all this holiday pans out. Yeah,
I'm hoping for a great holiday season online and off, and I'm really excited to see some of the whiz-bang experiences that are going to be happening this season.
All right, thanks, Tara.
Great, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks to Rick and Tara for being my guests this week. Now let's hit the highlights from Retail This Week e-newsletter, biggest retail weekly e-newsletter in Canada. You can subscribe on Retail Council of Canada for free. retailcouncil.org for free, and put that together each and every week, 51 weeks of the year. This week kicking off with some interesting news from Canadian Tire buying Party City. 65 stores, $175 million purchase. So there's some partying going on. I believe they're extending it into their Triangle rewards. This article talks about it. There's lots of articles in different papers. This from CBC, which had some good report. You talk about, and there's a quote from the folks at Canadian Tire. We believe Party City Canadian Tire partnership drives more trips, improves offers in micro seasons, strengthens connection with millennials and Canadian families, and expands the appeal of Triangle Rewards. So a good triple threat there. So congratulations to the folks at Canadian Tire. From Retail Insider, Craig Patterson's Retail Insider, we've got Drake's OVO brand. OVO continues Canadian store expansion. So I almost wonder why they weren't there already. It's funny, they're launched at the CF Toronto Eaton Centre, which is huge, Canada's most trafficked mall, about 55 million visits or footfalls each and every year. Not necessarily Canada's most productive mall, by the way. That's probably Yorkville. But boy, what a great place to be. So congratulations to our very own Drake and his concept. Do check that out. It's a great store. And always treat lots of interesting brand combinations there to check out. From Toronto Life, inside the playful cozy offices of Toronto-based mattress maker Endy. So you'll remember from the Voice of Retail and from Retail This Week, Endy purchased by Sleep Country, part of the Sleep Country brand, now a competitor, a Canadian-made, Canada-made competitor to Casper. And it's a nice look at their offices. They talk about milestones in the business, like how many mattresses they've donated through the charity partners, more than 5,000. So actually, I think when they offer like their competitor Casper, kind of the 90-day or 100 days where you can return it, and if it returns, I think goes to charity. So that's where all that comes from. From Business Vancouver, the great Daryl Jones talking about from Save on Foods talking about if and when voice commerce hits, they'll be there and ready for it. A very progressive retailer, just ensconced in the community. So good luck to Daryl. Fashion. This is from Baetica fashion rental e-commerce platform Dressed, raises $500,000, $525,000. So this is their virtual closet. So that has about 100 styles, 20 to 25 pieces. A little bit of a rental program at the high end. Good luck to them. Retail around the world, of course, from the tragic news in El Paso that took place in one of Walmart's actually biggest and busiest stores in the world. It's a great story from New York Times talking about how the employees who realized quickly what was going on called Code Brown, which is their code for active shooter. And then the employees were sacrificing themselves, or really risking their lives, I should say, to make sure their customers were taken care of. So kudos to the employees at Walmart for really for stepping up in such a difficult situation. And more to follow, I'm sure, with active shooters and Walmart in this whole episode. Robots taking the store at Kroger, Walmart, and Whole Foods. What could go wrong? This from Brian Pearson from Loyalty One. You can go back a couple episodes. You can hear Brian and my interview with Carolyn Papadopoulos talking about loyalty. This is talking about computers and robots in store and how pros and cons. So good overview. Very well worth the read from Forbes. From Retail Wire, CVS subscription programs goes big. So this is interesting, really interesting, as they're trying to take on Amazon Prime. So CVS, ginormous drugstore in the U.S., actually where Helena Folks now, who runs HBC, came from, called Care Pass subscription program. Free delivery, prescription medicines, OTC remedies, and other products sold by the chain with no minimum order for an annual fee of $48. So that's set about roughly half of what an Amazon Prime is. So that's a really interesting step up for CVS. For New York Times, Barney's declares bankruptcy. I think they're closing a bunch of stores. I think as Steve Dennis would say, less isn't better, better is better. So I think I'm not really sure they're doing cash on delivery for their relationship with brands. I don't see any future for Barney's. I'd like to be more positive, but I don't really see that as them coming out of that spiral. But good luck to the folks at Barney's. Regardless, UBS. This is an analyst report from Retail Dive talking about off-price. And so there's a bit of confusion in the market about how off-price is or isn't performing. The reality is off-price is still quite strong. They're just starting to compete with each other good overview retail article, and of course this is based in the U.S., this U.S. article from Retail Dive. And last but not least, in this section, UK retailers suffer weakest July sales on record. So a shout out to all our friends in the UK really struggling in retail. There's so much going on that takes away attention from retail and so much uncertainty. We can only wish them the best of luck, but they're certainly having a tough time of it in the UK. Retail news for entrepreneurs. Some good news here. Cannabis store approvals now in Alberta are 250. And now compare that to what, Ontario has just opened another tranche of a few. So Ontario continues to be well behind. Alberta just marching forward. Lots of entrepreneurs, lots of established cannabis, larger brands as well, who are opening up in Alberta. But they got a whole host of entrepreneurs featured here. Bow Cannabis, who are opening up. And now that we're starting to see the shortages resolve themselves, as I predicted 6 months ago, you're really starting to see entrepreneurs and retail start to flourish, and let's just hope Ontario gets that together as well and kind of starts to open up that market. Another feature article, Can Britain's top bookseller save Barnes & Noble? So Barnes & Noble was purchased by a bookseller, classic bookseller, and it's a great quote, and he talks about, frankly, at the moment, you want to love Barnes & Noble. This is the owner, now a new owner of Barnes & Noble. When you leave the store, you feel mildly betrayed, Mr. Don said over lunch. So great article there in New York Times. A spotlight on retail sustainability. A couple of articles. One is from Vogue, actually, of all places. Not of all places, but they typically, I don't see many articles in retail this week from Vogue. But this one talks about the unsustainable cost of free returns. And, of course, free returns has, this reverse logistics is really the devil in the details part of e-commerce. But this talks about, what happens to that and that apparel after it is done. So some, shocking numbers, really. Returns in the U.S. creates 5 billion pounds of landfill waste, 15 million tons of carbon emissions, produced by trash produced by 5 million people. In the EU, total packaging waste 2016 amounted to 87 million tons. So pretty shocking there. First ever carbon positive packaging made from cork. So congratulations to Peter Higgins and the folks at Lush. 6,000 cork pots. So really a nice step forward for our friends at Lush. So more on that, by the way, if you want to hear from Peter Higgins, great Peter Higgins, live on the stage of Vancouver, Retail West. So check that out at retailwest.ca. That's a wrap for this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple, iTunes, or your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc., and you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.